Hi, I'm IKEA, and for today's video, we'll be looking at the PTS for TU23 Year 6 Season 3, even though it's basically starting when Year 7 is almost about to start, as the game will be 6 years old and entering its 7th year in the middle of March. That's when the original release date was, and I'm kind of sad that they actually did not make this Season 7 or Year 7, Season 1, as that would have actually fixed up their schedule there. But no worries there, as long as the other things are good for the season, right? And actually, overall, I'll already lift the veil a little bit. Overall, I'm pretty content with what we're getting in this season, and we'll go through it as well through going through basically everything. We'll go through the brand set, then the named items, then we'll take it to the gear set, the exotic. And finally, we'll go into the modifiers and some miscellaneous things afterwards as well. Everything will be timestamped down below, so you can jump around as you want to. And yeah, we'll be discussing everything here. So yeah, let's go ramble all over this PTS. And before we go into the gear, I wanted to just make sure that to say the patch notes will be linked down below as well. You could just read through those as well if you're interested. They're, as always, on their Treadle board, and they contain, as it is here. You can basically just open it up from there. And yeah, all of the items that we're going to discuss here today are actually correctly in those patch notes. Let's go start with the gear set here, and the gear set, or the brand set that we get first, is a shiny monkey, which quite the name, yeah. Don't spank it. Don't spank this brand set. Yeah, it has, first of all, 15% skill duration. Then we have 5% skill efficiency, which is actually the interesting part of this one. And then we get 52% repair skill. The way that they've gone with the repair skill numbers, this is triple, basically, yeah, what Alps has and such. And yeah, that causes a little bit of annoyances with, basically weird numbers like 52. But overall, this as a brand set might find some use, and especially around, of course, this skill efficiency. I could see this putting this, for instance, into somewhere where you use a turret or drone for skill duration and then the skill efficiency on top of it. Same as well, maybe for Oxy. I haven't really played around on if this might be better for an Oxy, if we can get a different piece in there alongside, instead of maybe the Empress that we use generally for there. Because, of course, yeah, the skill duration by itself, a lot of things that we use don't benefit too much from it, but it's also generally can be used for some things like Oxy, where the skill health that we get from Empress isn't that useful. 5% on a 2-piece, that kind of makes sense when the 3-piece of Empress is 8%. I think there will be some places where we might make some use of this, maybe just for some filter drones as well, because yeah, the skill efficiency, of course, if you don't, and I should explain, if you're not aware what skill efficiency is, it is basically all of the yellow stats rolled into one. So you get skill duration, you get repair skill, you get skill damage, you get skill health, you get skill haste. Did I say repair skill? Yeah, there's 6 of them. Basically, you got and status effect. Actually, that's the one I think I was missing there. But basically, it is all of the yellow stats, minor stats that we can have, or well, especially as well, brand bonuses and mods and such, all rolled into one basically. And yeah, 5% of it is 5% equivalent into each and every one of those stats. So in my mind, especially if you can make use of multiple of those, so for instance, with the Oxy, when we have skill efficiency, we'll get status, skill duration, and then as well skill damage. Those are the two applying there. For something like more so, let's say, status effect builds, maybe Eclipse or such, the skill efficiency would still be skill damage and status effect. It gives you basically that twice, increasing your damage quite a bit. The downside of it is, though, of course, yeah, things like skill duration and such and skill health aren't that useful for when it comes to fire cams and such. But overall, it is at least an interesting set. We'll likely find some uses for it. but it isn't, yeah, it isn't a game changer. It does come with yellow cores at least. We don't need to do any unicorny things. Yeah, it is as a yellow set as well, pretty easy, of course, to get as the core is basically always maxed out. Going on to the named pieces that we'll get with this brand set. That is, first off, the axle here, this backpack. And that one has perfect energize, and well, it has no actually shimmering yellow text to explain which part has changed. It is the cooldown. The normal cooldown on energize is 60 seconds. This takes it down to 30 seconds. Energize doesn't get used much anyway. There are situations where you could make it work. But if you're going for this overcharged, in the same slot, you could have Acosta, and that could just get you there so much easier. You could have BTSU, and that could get you there, and also your entire team, you know, to make that shiny monkey really shine instead of this. Yeah, there is... I don't think this will be that useful. Cooldown reduction to this isn't that great. I feel actually, if we were to change this, maybe make it one skill tier more, alongside of that cooldown even, so that from 5 skill tiers you can go there. Still wouldn't make it that useful, would give it something unique though, because at the moment I feel that cooldown isn't, we don't really care about the cooldown on energized. Even on the very few places that it might get used, we wouldn't really care about the cooldown of it. It's much more because we triggered once and we do whatever we need to do in those 15 seconds that we have that overcharge. The other piece that we're getting is grease, as we're getting axle grease. On this one, it is a knee pad, and what it has actually is this second, or the stat that it has down here. It is one of its minor attributes is basically 16% status effects, where of course we could only have 10 if it was a normal stat. The thing with this is though that compared for the place where we would go with status effect would especially be Eclipse. The skill duration has no purpose there to a normal Eclipse. The skill duration will not actually increase the duration of a burn. It is basically for the fire cam, it is how long the cloud stays in the world once you fired it. For the stickies, it's how long it stays attached to an enemy before it dissipates, which we usually, you just ignite it anyway. Same for the fire cam, you basically, you land the cloud, you don't care about how long that cloud stays there. Sometimes, of course, it does dissipate, but it's not an important factor to try to improve by here then, basically, losing 4 status effect if we were to compare it to Electric or Golan, of course. With Electric, we would have a 10 status effect here, we would have 10 status effect there, and we would have 20% in total. Basically, here we're trading that for 16 status effect and then this 15 skill duration. The only place I can think of where this skill duration might be useful would be X0 for the flame turret. But even then, the issue becomes that you generally want to not use the X0 chest, and then you generally want to use one of the exotics, Val or Acosta or BTSU. So for instance, myself, I use it mostly with BTSU, and you have those 2 slots basically taken up. There is no place for this there. One thing as well that might be interesting as a whole for this gear set is to look at it in ways to try to get 2-piece Empress, 1 piece of this, and then see if we can maybe actually, we wouldn't get more damage, for instance, out of a turret drone or something, but we could get more, because of that skill efficiency, we could get more utility, having it have more skill health, having more, because also the first there applies it, having much more skill duration as well and such. That could be worth it as a trade-off with a ninja bike for some damage, but we'll find some uses for it, I think, definitely, especially for the gear set itself. We might even find some uses for the grease. The backpack, I'm not too sold on. Let's go on to the weapons, and we'll go to those. And we get the goalie as a fall, a big fall as the base of it. And we get the rusty, which is the RPK as the base of it. And first, let's actually discuss the new talent that we're getting with the new season, which is Pressure Point. These, of course, having the perfect versions of them. And pressure point is basically just a universal version of the ones that we already have at a much reduced amount, of course, at 15% for the perfect and 10% for the normal version, in the same vein as Eyeless or Ignited or Sadist or Thunderstrike, where they are all applying to a single status effect. This is applying to any status effect. So whatever status effect they have, you'll get 15% to them. It isn't 15% per status effect, it is just 15% if there is a status effect on them. Now, versus the ones that we just listed, like Sadist and such. Sadist, of course, at its base is 30. The perfect version is 35. Those are pretty high numbers. 15% isn't really. This is, of course, in the same area, well, is the same number as, for instance, Flatline would be with the perfect version. And even, for instance, the non-perfect version is 10%, and it's kind of behind that. I generally don't think there's going to be a place for this at 15%. I could see this being a little bit more useful if it was at 20%. Because status effects do happen a lot, even if you're not playing towards them. And especially for instances where you are alongside team players alongside of you that aren't per se, like, if there's an OD in the team, Sadist is a really good choice, but then even failing that, things like Killer or Measured will equal or surpass this. And then I'm speaking here specifically even the perfect version. The normal version, it is basically not too useful. I would love to see this go to 15 and 20. And I think actually at 15 and 20, they would be competitive to some choices and even in general use, even without being alongside of a dedicated CC'er, for instance, or such. One thing as well is that at 20%, one of the status effects that we use quite a lot, but we don't actually have a bonus for, is Foam. This could be quite useful, for instance, then for legendaries and such, where you can go that route. But of course, what you could also do is have OD in the team and have Sadist there and do much, much better. Then going actually, to perfect pressure point, it is actually on a decent weapon and then a less decent weapon on the RPK. The fall, of course, is still a decent high of the high ends. It is one of the better ones. It is pretty high on the burst. It is decent on sustain. Its big downside is that 40 round mag, but its reload is actually decent. So the fall actually, for me, became well, outside of the Lexington, of course, it kind of became the go-to for ammo conservation. And even with the Lexington round, it is still much better at conserving ammo, 700 RPM with a pretty decent base. It doesn't eat up as much ammo as a Lexington or especially before that, even the FAMAS. This is, though, the big fall, so this one handles a little bit worse than because we have the SA58 and then we have the SA58 Para. Of the three, the Para is the preferred one. It has a little bit more stability, especially if you're firing it. You'll notice that it does have a little better recoil pattern. So it isn't the best fall, although, of course, as we kind of see here, and that's also with the skin that I put on it, there is actually one cool skin for it. I don't remember actually exactly where this one came from. I'm going to guess it is a season track one. So that might be actually a reason to use it. But overall, the talent itself, I'm not sold. And of course, RPK version, the RPK itself, now being just 40 round base instead of the 45, and also having a pretty bad reload. And of course, yeah, this talent is not helping reload at all. I feel using RPK at this point is you're going to fast hands it. This is not going to be a usable weapon. But I could definitely see the fall seeing some use, but honestly, only if this goes up to 20. Yeah, let's move on to the next one as we move on into the gear set of the season. And this one is actually one of the more interesting parts that we're going to get. We're going to get the refactor. One thing that I'm already annoyed by is they have given up basically on giving it basically 2 words where we could, abbreviate it to a 2-letter acronym for all of these. Because, yeah, in the way that, Negotiator's Dilemma becomes ND and Eclipse Protocol becomes EP. This is just one word. This is just R. This is just the hard R. maybe not the best choice of words there, but it's just an R. And yeah, the R set, it gives us on 2 pieces status effect 15%. It gives us on 3 pieces 25% skill damage. And on 4 pieces is actually the interesting part of this. And that's the return to sender. Receive repairs of 10% of your damage dealt by your skills. Your allies receive repairs of 20% of the damage dealt by your skills. So whatever we deal as damage outwards, we get 10% of that back for ourselves. And 20% goes to our allies as well. Making it somewhat of a healer. And that is actually, yeah, pretty interesting. We deal damage to heal. This isn't a foreign concept that quite often is a mechanic used in a lot of games where dealing damage, of course, comes back to us in a little bit. But of course, here, also being to our allies is actually not that common. Now, one of the things that this already will do outright is that you can heal by just doing damage, and you don't have to keep awareness of where your allies are. You also don't need to keep line of sight. You also don't need to actually care where they are. You don't even need to care that they're like getting hit or something. It just heals them. That part is actually already really powerful from a set like this, because quite often, one of the reasons people will go down and such is just you don't have line of sight to them. You know, they're running around way too much, and your chems, you're not landing your chems that day, you're feeling unlucky. And yeah, this though will actually just outright heal them as long as you are doing your damage part. And then on the chest, we have the increased interest. This increases the amounts healed percentage-wise of our damage from 10% to 25% for ourselves and from 20% to 35% for our allies. This is actually one of those places where we could definitely go with the chest. Although actually, as I'll show in a minute, I think I will lean more towards doing a little bit more damage, because in my opinion, this is the way to go for this is to kind of look at it in the style of the combat medics, where you go damage first and then kind of healing second, because it heals already quite a bit. On the backpack, we have the backpack talent over-engineered, and this is while at full armor, repairs received from return to sender will provide bonus armor up to 40% of your total armor. Does not apply to allies. That last sentence of does not apply to allies is one of the reasons I think we won't be using this backpack much. You could, of course, yeah, generate quite a decent amount of bonus armor. We can't really turn that into, for instance, usage-wise for, let's say, Intimidate or such. You won't be getting into those ranges, although maybe somebody will, you know, maybe they'll see that as a challenge, me saying that, and actually go for it. But I generally, yeah, I would pick a different backpack and situationally go with or without the chest. Doing more damage here is also a way of healing more. Not as much as we're getting from the chest, but you're also doing more damage. Like, that part is a quite important thing to say. Percentage-wise, I feel the entirety of the set is a little bit too high. 20% for allies from our damage, especially if you're doing decent damage with a turret and drone, can actually keep a lot of people quite upright. Because going, for instance, with a setup like this is kind of how I landed on it here. Although, of course, yeah, everything's subject to change. This was just a testing setup. But I just want to show as well how much this can heal. And we're actually going to do it at the range because we can damage ourselves quite easily. I'm combined arms plus glass. This should be a sacrifice. I think that will likely outdo this. Well, not likely. It will outdo that. And also, yeah, get our even a little bit more damage there. The way I see setting up this set is very much going to be especially leaning towards doing a decent amount of your own damage and then kind of having the healing on the side, at least with the numbers that it has now. Maybe if it gets reduced a little bit more. Because one of the things is, while my turret is going, I'm going to actually try to damage myself in between. Yeah, and this is just the turret. And especially, of course, if I were to add to its damage, as we do there, it heals even more. And this is, of course, 10%. This is doing double of this. I don't have the chest on this. It's doing double of this to my allies. That is a little bit too much, especially in my opinion. It is a little bit too much, and especially because it is also, yeah, you don't need to have line of sight. You're just dealing damage, and also you're dealing damage. You're dealing a decent amount of damage in comparison to a normal skill build, which are actually, you know, a turret drone build on in a normal setup. You're especially losing out on a little bit of the brand bonuses, of course, although not even by that much, because we do still have 25% skill damage there. What we're really losing out on is more the skill hastes, and those weren't really important for the turret drone anyway. Also here, actually, I'm using pieces that are from a turret drone build that was actually more set up for crit chance, and actually in the modifier that actually worked out a little bit as well. Because one of the things is as well that the modifier of this season, as we'll talk about later, also adds in to skill damage, not by a lot, but a decent amount, and then also has an at its peak has overcharge. And well, when we for instance do that here, now our damage goes up a lot more higher. The turret is about to expire, but you know, even on myself when I'm doing 10%, you know, we're continuously healing up. The downsides of it are though that healing is nice, but there's a reason we don't per se heal through everything. The health gate is still there. If you get shot by a sniper, it doesn't matter if this set heals you for a cajillion, a gwillion, whatever number you want to go for. It doesn't matter if that sniper then hits that same person again and they were health gated already, they will go down. That has always been a thing. Now, this depends, of course, if the person kind of is aware of the health gate system and then, you know, just goes and hides like a good little boy for 30 seconds and, you know, and then peeks again or just kills the sniper outright, prioritizing those kind of targets. Because yeah, chip damage is completely negated by this. But yeah, a sniper dog taking 3 shots at you. The first one will put you at Hellgate, you know, an elite one that takes 3 in a row. The first one will put you at Hellgate. If you don't go into cover, this won't save you. So that will be kind of the balancing factor for it still, though. Value-wise, though, I do feel it is a little bit too high, especially if you put a little bit of a build alongside of it that has a little bit of chunkiness. This can heal them up quite a lot, especially because it is percentage-based. A lot of our healing in the game currently is flat value-based, especially, you know, a healing hive, a chem, or such. This is percentage-based, and especially if the blue cores go up there and are, you know, a striker with 4 blue cores can still do a ton of damage. And they're kind of invincible as when they're alongside of a good player that knows how to deal with a turret and drone and actually does output the damage needed for it. But yeah, let's move on to the exotics. And moving on to the Oxpecker. The healing is less rewarding than the hurting, but I'm content as the unattributed text. This is actually one of the few ones as well that it's unattributed. It isn't saying who said that. But someone said it at some time. Its talent is Symbiosis. At its core, this is a MP7, and it is actually the base of the MP7, the rate of fire, reload, everything else of the MP7. And it has Symbiosis. While having a shield deployed, a loose shield held at a rate of 10% per second, your shield receives repairs of 25% of the damage dealt by this weapon. So kind of similar actually to the gear set that we're kind of getting. There's some healing going on, percentage healing again as well. And it is based on damage once more, although as well, the weapon itself also hurts the shield for 10% per second. And this is of course being flat values that means that you do want to actually only have your shield up if you're actually hurting people, because otherwise your shield can only be up for 10 seconds before it runs out, although likely a little bit longer because you do have active regeneration, of course, on it. Mod-wise, what we get is especially important that we get this 15 crit chance here, meaning that it is basically, at least without considering a talent, in the same way that we can put 15 crit chance on an MP7, here we can also put 15 crit chance there. So it is at least equivalent to an MP7 without a damage talent. We're also then on top of that getting a 50% optimal range, one which gets us actually to 32 meters optimal range, although effective range, the actual range that you can fire at and actually hit something, I wouldn't say 32 actually reaches there unless you have a ton of weapon handling on the build to make the accuracy a little bit better. We're also getting this 15% headshot, so yeah, you do want to aim high if you can to make use of that a little bit. It is important actually, yeah, that it has that 15 crit chance, meaning that is at least viable damage-wise without considering, for instance, that, yeah, the talent doesn't, of course, add to damage. And that's the thing. We could, of course, have an MP7 with Killer do a ton more damage, but is this shield healing useful at all? And for that, let's actually take it into some action. We're running it here with Hunter's Fury, with 2 blue cores, Vigilance, Obliterate, a very standard setup. Dildo, the Oxpecker as well. We have it actually reconfigured to be with damage to targets out of cover. The blueprint is already here. The blueprint for all the exotics is here, which is kind of good to see, as yeah, sometimes it has taken a while for them to be added. So they're here already in the PTS, so they should be there already at the start of the season, hopefully. And yeah, what we don't really want to do is we can actually have more than enough damage to kind of heal our shield while we have it up and we have an enemy in front of us. But we don't want to be just standing out with our shield out and not actually be shooting an enemy, because we are, of course, reducing the health of our shield as we go. It makes it a lot more run and gunny. You're moving from target to target and trying to not keep it up as often. We have some extra people joining this fight, but yeah, we'll finish them off. Of note, the SMG does not heal your shield while it's on your back, so you can't have a very damaged shield and then yeah, just put it away and then you know you get it healed up by just shooting enemies. Here I'm gonna go on to this side. This LMG is likely the most dangerous enemy, so I'll go deal with him first. I know, even as long as it's a single enemy, we can kind of actually out-heal the damage of the SMG, even though they're actually, I missed all of my shots basically. We'll wait actually for the cooldown to come back. But with the other enemies, we could see that, yeah, as long as it's a 1 versus 1, I can out-heal their damage and also the damage of the SMG. We'll likely actually keep this one guy alive for a second, and hopefully we'll make him shoot at me. Even though there's a... Could I have your attention, sir? But yeah, as we get that, although of course he's gonna just melt away. One of the things, of course, it is based on how much damage you're dealing. So you do want to have damage there. So even more so than this, I would maybe go with some blue cores. Also, actually, so here we have the modifier off. Importantly, for this season, we'll have actually one of the modifiers, as we have already actually kind of equipped there, is this fortified shield. And yeah, the modifiers aren't showing unless you go back out and in after you've turned it on. And yeah, this increases our shield's base health by 100%, which will increase it just basically by 100%, also by the tiers and such that we get, in the same way that, if a base of a weapon gets increased or doubles. It is definitely useful and it is definitely usable, this one. For myself, I will likely lean more towards just tech tanking builds, where we have the consistency. We don't kind of have to think about it too much. But for just, yeah, general use, I could definitely see trying to work towards this and then having definitely a very strong shield. Basically, as long as you're firing, you're doing pretty well. The downsides of it, of course, though, are this being an MP7, we have 40 rounds, and then we have not the fastest reload there either. And yeah, when you're reloading, you're doing so, yeah. Dealing still, if your shield is at doing damage to it. You can't also out-heal multiple enemies shooting at you or very big things. And of course, as well, the thing is, snipers and such exist, and they will just kind of take your shield out anyway. And then the big elephant in the room is we could have a damage challenge here. And a damage challenge, especially on a better weapon as well. The MP7, while not bad, is just mediocre. It's a B tier at best. With the current in its current state, this isn't helping it by not having a damage challenge here instead of having, for instance, let's say some form of a vector together with a better talent or a much better talent. Birdie's quick fix pack. We have stolen her backpack. That is one of the 2 gear exotics that we're going to get in the coming season. We'll have to see actually how they release them. This season, of course, we're getting one piece of gear, which was the Centurion holster just from the season. and the other one is gonna come from the Master Climax, where we masterfully climax all over Bichon that they showed, which is the boss of that Master Climax. Yeah, here though we're not sure actually if one of these will be tied to maybe again the Master Climax or well, actually the Climax mission by itself, because the Climax mission will have a drop rate for it. With the chest of this season that we'll still get this season. But yeah, next season we'll have either, I'm guessing one of these will go to that Climax mission. This one though, to discuss Birdie's quick fix pack, which is, we're just gonna call these likely quick fix or just Birdie, is the talent of Combat Medic. It comes actually with a yellow core, skill, haste, repair skill. It is very much this season is kind of in the way of healing and such, even though actually, yeah, the gear set that we're getting, of note as well with that, yeah, it doesn't actually, incoming repair nor repair skill actually applies to the gear set, the dealing damage to get healing. It doesn't get affected by those. And yeah, this Combat Medic is here, and we get 50% revive speed, which actually is kind of nice. You do revive quite a bit faster, especially just on a down ally. You pick them up pretty quick. Then as well, we have minus 50% weakened debuff timer, which is when you go down, there's a 30-second icon in your buff debuff bar, and if you get downed again in that time, you don't get downed. You get you will be killed. Basically, at that point, you will be dead. Yeah, that of course is kind of mitigating that a little bit, but then this is it is based on basically the reviving either being revived or being reviving others, or actually just picking them up from being a down state, because yeah, it provides plus 50% damage resistance to both agents while receiving or being revived. So even during the revive, you have some bonuses alongside of that revive speed. And for 5 seconds after a successful revive. So even afterwards, you still have a decent chunk of damage resistance to get into cover or such. And yeah, successful revives provide +1 skill tier for 30 seconds. Revives at skill tier 6 grant overcharge for 15 seconds. Of note, and notably missing, is the length of the of the cooldown. Because yeah, we are of course just getting overcharged for 15 seconds. We do get a +1 skill tier for 30 seconds. There's no cooldown mentioned here, and the thing is, there is none. There is currently no cooldown associated with this, so you can actually trigger this ad infinitum, but yeah, it's not too useful though, even that way. Overall, it is actually a usable piece maybe for healers and such, and of course this will get used definitely in a very targeted way, speedrunning style, in certain positions to get overcharges going for the player themselves or for others to get them overcharged. They'll either you get downed yourself and you get overcharged, because also yeah, if the player themselves gets that, and of course yeah, we will pick each other up pretty quick, and you can of course always just grenade yourself, and someone will pick you up, even a random team, and you'll get the overcharge. But in comparison to, for instance, the Black Tusk special units gloves that we can have, the BTSU gloves, that is a supercharge. That is an overcharge applying to all allies. This is personal. Still very useful, still a very easy way to overcharge, although not as easy, for instance, as Acosta. Could this be used in some way without a cooldown to maybe get some more use out of it? The thing is, usually if we're overcharging, for instance, in very much in like speedrun settings and such, if we're overcharging, we're doing whatever the hell we're doing in 15 seconds and getting the hell out. Like if we need more than that, we've already failed. It's not it's a slow run. And the BTSU, of course, again can do that. Acosta can do that. Even overclock we can do that with. This is kind of a clunky way to get there, but it's still very usable, and we'll likely find some uses for it here and there. Of note as well, currently in the PTS, alongside of it not having a cooldown, because actually I think it should just have a cooldown, likely a 30-second cooldown. which still would be, you know, you can basically be overcharged for 15 seconds and then not, and then again for 15 seconds afterwards. But somebody basically also is giving up their damage while you're doing that because they'll be downed or you'll be downed. So the thing it's also doing currently is acting as a ninja bike backpack, because as we can see, we have a one piece of the Shiny Monkey gear set, or gear. It's annoying that it's called Shiny Monkey Gear, so my brain goes gear set. But yeah, it's a Shiny Monkey brand set. We have two pieces marked as active, even if we go, for instance, here to having, you know, let's equip an Brazos piece. Yeah, we have again two pieces marked as active. This is, of course, the trait of the Ninja Bike backpack, where it activates more than one brand bonus. It activates basically the next brand bonus available. This shouldn't happen, of course, and this will likely get fixed before it goes into live, I would hope, right? There's also the downside of not having a second PTS phase, because, yeah, we have only one PTS phase this time, an extended one, but yeah, they're not going to do a second PTS phase. I hope they get this fixed up. This being a ninja bike alongside of everything else that it does, well, first of all, that doesn't seem like this isn't definitely intended, because it's much more useful than ninja bike then at that point. Even, you know, missing those cores, you know, it's doing more than it by itself. This doesn't seem intended, and yeah, hopefully this will get fixed before it reaches live. Now, moving on to the Exodus gloves here. The Exodus gloves are coming with a blue core, a crit chance, a hazard protection. These stats, is annoying that it's in that way. And of course, actually, being an exotic glove, it comes with a talent, and yeah, you give up the brand bonus basically for that. And yeah, there are the flavor text of it again does not have attribution to anybody, so we don't know who said this, but I'd like to make a withdrawal. Yeah. And what it does is its talents-wise smoke screen. On armor break, drop a smoke bomb at your feet, concealing you from enemies for 3 seconds. Cooldown 40 seconds. This piece of gear has been actually very much the second that I said. It was like, oh, actually, well, kind of depends on how this works. We'll kind of show it in a second. But then as well, I saw the stats and went, man, and I still feel that way. Man, if this was just crit chance, crit damage, this would be much more viable, because at the very least, we're also giving up a brand bonus, if nothing else, for this exotic talent. This blue core, I could live with it being crit chance, and then also, you know, giving up a red core and then a crit damage here for a lot of builds where this would be useful, because, yeah, basically when we armor break, when we get shot too much, we drop a smoke bomb and we get basically a little bit of a reprieve from that point. But how much damage are we willing to give up for that? I feel this exceeds the amount that I'm willing to give up for that. But let's go actually see it in action, because also it has a little bit of a quirk. And here are those gloves equipped. We're going to actually take them out into the field. I'm going to show the effect, and then also show an extra bit of the effect. So yeah, here we're just going to go engage these guys. I do also have the modifier on for this. We're just going to be very, you know, we won't care how engaged we are. Of note as well, I'm gonna keep an eye on my health. I'm gonna also toss out a decoy there. I'm gonna go hide. Although actually, well, one of them still saw it. But actually, I was out of combat there for a little bit, a tiny amount. Enough though to regen half of my health there. Especially in group settings, you will be out of combat when that effect triggers. Let's actually go to the second wave here. And yeah, there's a 40-second cooldown. The cooldown is on the bar, so yeah, you don't get it continuously. Let's actually murder this wave and let them come again. I'm waiting kind of for the cooldown to go. I do want to keep my obliterate here. I'll just wait for them to come a little. It's gonna toss out a decoy. You know what? Shoot me again a little. Let's see actually, because I do definitely have had it go all the way. I don't know. There again. Yeah, too. And that by itself is already an interesting effect sideline, because it actually does pull us out of combat, and then of course we get our out of combat healing. Well, as long as we have, of course, no regen on or off or not on. So there's even, yeah, a little bit of shenanigans you can pull with this. The enemies basically completely disregard you for those 3 seconds. You could also use that in some settings to maybe push through them or such. I could see this actually being handy for even when you go into the DZ and run through landmarks and just, you know, try to get the quickly to the crate and just open it. This gives you a little bit of an extra advantage going through that. Not that it was needed, the decoy did enough already. And then, yeah, in group settings quite often as well, if you just go and hide, it'll actually give you a full heal, which is, I feel, maybe unintended, but yeah, it does add also a little bit of utility that way. So it gives you basically half of a heal there. And also as well, it gives you a little bit of armor, so you can armor break again, because that is, of course, part of it. The thing is, though, the next season, as well, as we'll actually discuss here briefly, will be, as last time, the PTS already had the directives for the season here already. We see that it's basically, we're keeping special ammo, we're keeping fog of war and pistolero, and in this case, no regen is swapping to fragile armor, and cool skills is swapping to scavenge skills. Of note is, yeah, fragile armor, it does actually fragile armor break, of course, when you actually trigger this. So directive-wise, it isn't aligning well with the coming season. But with other places or having it off, because, yeah, your armor breaks would still stack. You still get, of course, yeah, just the hiding from it. This does seem very useful, for instance, as well, for places like Countdown or such, where, you know, if you're getting shot at, generally the thing is to just, yeah, you go hit health gate basically, and you just have to hide for a little bit. This will kind of help players that are, you know, a little bit more aggressive maybe, to be able to just, yeah, have a little bit of reprieve to get into cover and then just sit there and just, yeah, let the aggro go to others, of course. The effect of it as well is actually visually kind of cool, and I do kind of like it for that. Yeah, let's move on to the next, and moving on to the modifiers of the season. Where, of course, the PTS, they're giving us the new global modifier. That's going to be Rogue Momentum. Rouge Momentum. As, you know, I feel a bunch of people will, on purpose or maybe on accident, get that wrong. And yeah, it's very much interesting to see momentum when, you know, we get so much corrections of memento. Here we're getting basically the inverse of it, actually, with moment in it. And yeah, let's see how many people go with Rouge. What it is at its core, as we won't go all the way through it, especially on this one as well, we're just going to highlight a few things. If you want to read it all outright, yeah, either pause or go to the patch notes, where it already contains all of them, and in detail as well. And actually in more detail than some of the descriptions here, because some parts are missing actually. But what it is that as we get kills, and especially as well accolade kills, so headshot kills or multi-kills or tactical kills, which is just weak point kills, or actually open world damage kills, we gain momentum, and that momentum carries us through several tiers. So here, as we can see, it's going from 1 to 25%, 25 to 50%, or well, 26 to 50%, 51 to 75, 76 to 95, and 96 to 100 as the cap of it. And what we get in there is especially that we get some weapon and skill damage. This weapon and skill damage is just additive to our general weapon damage. It is just all weapon damage at its base. It even shows up actually in the stat pages. But this means as well that it will actually apply to things like Headhunter as well. But what it then also means is, yeah, it is going into a pool that is heavily filled in already, and is going to give us basically a pretty bad diminishing returns because of that. This 5% is, yeah, not just a full 5%. It is in the amp like that. Same for the skill damage end of it. It's just additive to other skill damage on the build. So also, the less of it that you have, the more you would benefit from this. What we also get is movement speeds. As we see, it goes from 10%, 15%, and then 20%. It caps at 20, and also it does not add to any other sources of movement speed. So yeah, if you have a Lady Death, that basically the cap that is on the Acosta explained as being 20% being the max movement speed increase. That seems to be also just the cap, like having multiple ways of reaching that. What will happen though is, yeah, if the Lady Death and then you get the movement speed, it does, they just carry over from each other. They just, but basically while they're overlapping, you don't get 40%. But you will then just have 20% once one of them falls away. We also get some rate of fire and reload speed later on in here as well, up to a max of it being basically at 20% weapon/skill damage and 25% rate of fire on the damage ends, but then also having a 20% movement speed and 20% reload speed, which is quite nice, of course, as well. What we don't get here, though, and I feel it's kind of missing a little bit, even though it wouldn't need to be much of it, seeing as we're getting skill damage, the weapon damage is getting a reload speed. I feel the skill damage should get skill haste here as well alongside of it, because also, yeah, this rate of fire as well will only apply to the weapon end, so it's still a little bit too much to the weapons and not enough to the skills here. Although, of course, yeah, what we do get as well at its max is that we get skill overcharged. And what it is that while you are in this final tier, in this 96 to 100%, you actually are continuously overcharged while you're in there. And that is, of course, very powerful, depending on what skills you're using. Even if you're just using a shield, that shield is invincible. And it's kind of weird to me that, yeah, that they're adding this in with the Oxpecker alongside of it. Even though, of course, yeah, you can kind of use the Oxpecker to get to this point, but once you reach this point, and you can kind of maintain it decently well, especially if you're shooting at some enemies, as we'll see in some of the passives here. This level skill overcharge will do what the Oxpecker does already, and actually, to me, in a much easier form. But that's, of course, if you have the modifiers on. For our actives, we do have 3 pretty good actives. One of them is kind of tedious, and I haven't played around much with it, which is this Vendetta. You need to basically do specific type of kills against specific type of enemies, or well, they'll get marked, and you need to kill them in certain ways with primary weapon, skill kill, or pistol kill. And if you do, you get some damage reductions or some bonus armors. If you don't, you get penalized by having some damage done to you. This Tactical Supreme overall as well kind of seems like an interesting way, because we are actually getting all passive modifiers. Effects are increased by 100%, so we're gaining actually on the passives. The thing is, though, that overall the passives aren't that great this season. Like, we don't have a by the teeth as a spoiler warning, as we'll get to the passive in a second. So we don't really have anything for this to really buff up that much, although there's a few that we can kind of definitely get there. And this is, of course, yeah, while it is active, once you activate it. With it as well, we can actually extend it by doing headshot kills. This annoyingly, though, yeah, you're not going to get that quickly headshot kills, except, of course, if you're on a determined build with pistol, or determined build with hotshot, for instance, or something. I've noticed as well, of course, that, yeah, the base of this season is weapon damage, so it does even help Headhunter builds as well to reach a higher cap and such. And yeah, you can get a little bit of addition to that as well, that skill kills at 1 second, and you can max it out at 40 seconds if you actually get a ton of skill kills or such. But then, yeah, the penalty of it is that you can't actually gain momentum while it is active. You're only gaining duration increases, basically. So, and yeah, you can't have it actually be the maximum tier there as well. But the main one actually for this next coming season, and the one I'll likely be running, and most people as well, kind of the prime time of this this season in next season, is this overdrive. And overdrive basically just takes you to the max for a little bit, and gives you the max momentum. But afterwards, your momentum gains are reduced, but that's not a big issue, because it's 50% for 30 seconds, but it takes you instantly to the cap. And what you get as well during that time is plus 30% skill damage, plus 30% weapon damage, plus 30% rate of fire on top of the weapon damage as well. So the weapons are going very high, and also unlimited ammo supply. And this is actually quite interesting as well for, of course, the ammo reduction mods, the directives. What we have as well is then a bunch of the passives. I won't actually discuss them all. You can go to the batch notes and kind of read through them. The ones that I can already see being very useful is, this next season, skill builds as well are actually, so this current season, skill builds weren't getting much anyway. Turret drone builds weren't, eclipses weren't, a bunch of, it was definitely the season for weapons. They're giving turrets, pulses, and turrets and pulses and shields, quite a big buff. And then as well, decoys and seekers are also getting some things for them to grab. And so, for instance, of note, we have, especially for the pulse, we have, this will, I think, be the go-to for just red builds. This will be microwave coils, which actually, when you pulse enemies, and this can also be any source of pulse. So if you have the link laser pointer, if you have the spotter drone, if you have any other ways of pulsing, just Night Watcher with a pulse or just a normal pulse, they can receive the burn status effect, and it's a 5% momentum for every affected enemy as well. So you can actually use this as well as momentum buildup. And this, especially with the spotting drone that has a very short duration and just continuously is like pulsing things, works really well. But just by itself, it is just a built-in CC, especially, for instance, if you're running Technician with the Link Laser Pointer. Even if you're not running Flatline alongside of it, it is just a random CC here and there. Together with that, actually, the Pulse here as well has the option to get you a 25% chance to receive a blacklist mark on an enemy. And blacklist is kind of the enemy mark of this season, and those enemies, basically, if they shoot you, you lose more momentum than normal enemies. If you kill them, you gain more momentum just from that, and you can gain a hefty amount of it, like 20%-ish from a blacklist enemy. This causing enemies to become blacklist enemies as well gets you the opportunity to gain momentum quite quickly. Together with that, actually, the mainstay, I feel, for red builds of the next season is going to be this critical momentum. Of course, the crit chance, crit damage based ones, not headhunter based ones. And this is critical hits have a 50% chance to grant 1% momentum. So basically, we have, instead of a 60% chance of crits, we have a 30% chance of each hit being 1% momentum. And this builds up, of course, very quickly if you're firing a weapon at, let's say, 15 rounds a second, like a FAMAS, or even more than that, because you're on Striker and adding 15% rate of fire to that. This has been my go-to as well, just for charging up the momentum, together, of course, with just triggering the overdrive and getting to max right away. And then actually having 50% reduced amounts coming in is not a big issue when you have creating blacklist enemies and you're getting some momentum going from crit chance. And even whenever you pulse enemies, if they're affected by it, you get also this bonus amount as well. That will be the go-to for reds. Of note as well, there's a whole setup for shield where we can actually have a double health to shields. And as well, actually behind the shield, if you're getting hit behind the shield, you heal a little bit. Well, that one's not that useful. And as well, we can actually have a healing one in here as well. Critical hits restore 0.15% of your maximum armor. This is basically a 2.25% if you're accounting as well for the crit chance, 60%. Regen as long as you're continuously hitting enemies, which, depending on if you're maybe, running a Bullet King and just continuously hitting an enemy that is like not dying very quickly, you can have 2% regen going. I don't feel, though, it is still that useful in comparison to some of the other things we can pick here. We do have as well things that, for instance, affect explosive skill kills, reduce the cooldown of that skill by 30%. Actually, this other one as well. Seeker Mines deal double damage to blacklisted enemies. And what if you create a few of those with this Reaper? There's a lot of interaction together with that as well. There's a few CC ones. So, for instance, this is the decoy skills. Whenever it actually times out or gets destroyed or deactivated by you, it can blind up to 2 enemies. This does seem to have like a range limit, around 20-ish meters is my guess. It isn't infinite. It doesn't just, across the map cause that. You have the same as well for the drone. And also, when it gets destroyed or gets timed out or such, it will actually trigger this shock, which can actually be quite handy, actually. It's a decent CC way. And as well, even, skill kills, getting double momentum gains and such. Of note is nothing in here. Even like one of the stronger ones is, for instance, this striker drones damage by 15%, but reduces it down to there. You might have noticed there is no liability here. There's no impatient here. There's no bite the teeth. And yeah, they've definitely learned a lesson of the last season. The main modifier that we have, this rogue momentum, that's actually where we're getting most of our damage increases from. And this one definitely 20% weapon / skill damage and 25% rate of fire. That is actually pretty powerful. Skill overcharge on top of that skill damage as well for drones and such is pretty powerful. But yeah, we don't have passives that are insane. Because let's be honest, By the Teeth was insane. Even doubling these with for instance, that other active, yeah, 15 becomes 20%. This shield, though, yeah, you do gain basically another, this 100% becomes 200%, so you gain basically 3 times the health of your shield there. That is pretty powerful situationally. But yeah, there is no really hard-hitting buffs to there, and actually, I feel that is a good thing. They seem to have learned a lesson. They are not. This definitely feels pretty powerful. It doesn't feel as overpowered as being in long range and hitting those by the teeth, or even hitting reversal and bringing by the teeth close and just melting enemies. We don't have that here, and I think that is a good thing. The momentum itself is actually pretty powerful by itself. This base one is actually what we're gonna try to get up as quickly as possible, and yeah, We'll do some things as well. We can get some CC out of the modifiers there, and that can be very nice. Lastly, talking about the enemy modifier, because there's of course always one on the enemy. What we get is this frenzy, and this is a hostile modifier. And the interesting thing is, it's based on how far we are in the journey. So if we're at chapter 3, they get plus 10%, chapter 4 plus 20%, and a 15s. So they get movement speeds as well and such, and rate of fire, of course, towards us. And then also they get regen, actually, which is yeah, quite well. I haven't actually gotten further into the journey, I'll admit here. So I haven't seen it actually in action, but it is actually, this seems pretty hefty. It does cap at this 30% rate of fire, 20% movement speed, and plus 20% health armor, or armor and / health regen. 20% per second seems a lot, and it's weird that it is actually tied into this, because what happens if, like, on my second account, I just don't do the journey for the whole season and I just use that as my farming account? So how does that work? Those kind of things, I don't have an answer here yet. We haven't actually been able to test with that. Also, is it just the leader? Is it just the is it the entire group? Is it personal per like, if they're shooting at somebody who is who hasn't done chapter 3? Do they do less rate of fire? And because how would that work as well for the armor? So there's a bunch of questions I still have here, especially with the hostile modifier, and we'll kind of have to have those answered as the season goes on. And also to show it in action, actually, we have it here with, I'm going to take it a Heartbreaker Tech Tank into it. For the passives, we have actually those 2 pulse ones, the Reaper, the Microwave, and also then this Critical Momentum, where we gain momentum from crit hits. Here though, I'm actually as well using the Link Laser Pointer here, of course, for the Heartbreaker parts of it. Even though, yeah, I'm not actually even going with Flatline here. We're just taking Killer, even though, yeah, we do have that Link Laser Pointer. Overall, Killer, we can extract more damage from it. It is a graded weapon, although actually I haven't charged up the Memento yet here on it. We're coming into it basically cleanly. We have that cooldown actually on the bar for Overdrive. It is going up and up. I'm going to actually wait it out for a few seconds because, yeah, we do want to use Overdrive here as our start. It'll get us all the way to the max. And actually, even with its 50% reduction afterwards, we'll stay at the max quite consistently, especially with, yeah, a bunch of our passives giving us as well some momentum. As yeah, we'll get that in there. There seems to be somebody over there. These guys don't seem to be caring. One of the things as well is actually we do have the thing causing us to have pulse causing fires. Basically, whenever we pulse an enemy, there's a 50-50 chance that they catch on fire. That's actually, yeah, it's in the patch notes as 50-50, and then it isn't actually in the actual description of it. And there, yeah, when in the background we were hearing somebody screaming that they were on fire, basically, or like screaming because they were on fire. One of the things is every time that the pulse actually runs out, we have a chance again of activating. If an enemy is pulsed and there's a different source of pulse coming towards them, it doesn't actually get you a chance again. So they need to be unpulsed, and then whenever you pulse them then from any source, at the start of it, they'll have the option of maybe getting set on fire. And this causes a bunch of CC just randomly to happen, but also causes, for instance, if you're just using the big pulse, so for instance, yeah, we had some enemies kind of over there running away from this fight, although, well, slowly walking away in a different direction. We would actually, yeah, if you're in the open world and you just pulse, you're setting a bunch of stuff on fire and aggroing everything in the neighborhood, which might be actually an interesting way to troll some allies when you're out in the open world. Here, of course, yeah, we're not struggling too much, but what we're getting here as well, we're basically the whole fight here, we've been maxed out on momentum. I feel actually the momentum gain that we have available to us is maybe actually a little bit too high, especially that critical momentum. I feel they didn't completely think it out. It gives quite a bit, but of course, yeah, you do need to be on a build with crit. That will make it so as well that actually if you're running a skill build, having a lot of crit isn't a bad idea. Like with the refactor set that I was running earlier, which had a bunch of crit chance, I was actually using that crit chance to just make crits happen. They don't need to do a lot of damage. I don't need to have high crit damage. I just need to crit and then 50% of our crits. So basically, yeah, the half of that, if we're at 60, basically making it 30% of our shots is also giving us 1% momentum, and we're making a lot of shots happen, of course, especially if you consider even a chatterbox or something like that. And yeah, the damage increase is quite high, and here of course as well it is making skills overcharge. We can see actually that my shield on my back is overcharged. When I pull it out, it is gonna, when we are in that range, it is gonna be invincible because of the overcharge. But also, it is basically pulling up skills up to skill tier 6 because of that. Well, when it's in overcharge, in the overcharge state, making my Artificer Hive basically a 6 tier one, which will heal for quite a bit. Truly quite a bit. And here some more CCs happenings and such, and yeah, we're kind of keeping ourselves at the cap here. And actually we can't even, I believe, look in here, and yeah, we have 57.2% repair there from the Artificer. And I think we're actually outside of the church there. But overall, this is very powerful. It is very helpful for running gun builds, of course. We can give up a lot of damage and still kind of compete because we're getting some rate of fire and some just basic weapon damage going. It isn't as powerful as this season. Just the base modifier of this season, especially if you're using it well, is overall as powerful as this. Even though, for instance, there being a rate of fire buff in there, that does mean that it will affect, for instance, the stacking ability of Heartbreaker here. Even though that, yeah, we can see that it's still annoying because I was expecting her to be on the minigun. We are still at half stacks basically after all that fighting. Let's actually stack up to full here for a second. We'll use an ACS on this hostile supply convoy, heavily armed edition. Man, yeah, actually we're still not fully stacked. Let's stack some more. is the story of Heartbreaker by itself. We just need to always just stack a little bit more. And especially here as well, once we have killer activated and also this damage and also the rate of fire, yeah, where this is still a very powerful modifier. We'll have to see, of course, how effective the enemy's counterpart to this is. I feel we'll still be well able to deal with it, just because while they get regen, and that will affect, of course, how quickly we kill them. We kill them generally quick enough that 1 or 2 ticks at most from that enemy frenzy will happen. But what they don't have here is just more armor or more health. I feel that would be actually the go-to a little bit to make it more fair. I feel instead of a lot of this, they could just improve or like increase the enemy armor and health. The way that Stellite, for instance, this season works, it gives a reduction, but in effect it's also, of course, just how much damage we do to those enemies. So we need to do more shots to kill them. And Stellite, of course, is kind of the balancing factor of this season for now, because that is actually one that kind of hurts. We'll have to kind of see this, because the incoming damage and such and their movement speed isn't that impactful. This 20%, we'll just have to basically out-damage it, of course, but that shouldn't be too hard. But this will affect as well things like names and such more so, because it's a percentage-based heal on them as well. But yeah, having seen the rogue momentum here in action, overall, I do think it is impressive. It is actually... I've enjoyed my time with it, and definitely as a modifier, I'll be running it quite a bit. It is definitely not as OP as our current season modifier in Point Blank is, which I actually prefer, but it is still a very big damage boost. And yeah, I would love to also have some extra, maybe, a heroic plus at some point to kind of use this in and actually, make it a little bit more of a fair challenge. As we move on to some weapon rebalances, there is some slight ones. There isn't as much as last season, although actually basically a lot of weapons are getting touched. Most of them, though, basically all of them, with the exception of 4, are just getting changes to their reload speed, which is not that impactful. It does matter. We will care about that, but not to a very high degree. The single nerf in all of this is the Lexington, as it came in, of course, during this season, and it caused a little bit of uproar, being basically the most OP version of the high ends. There's really, when you're picking a high-end AR, there's really no alternate than it, if you have it. And if you don't have it, then yes, then there are a few picks to have. This kind of annoyed me, especially the Lexington being just better. I don't like there being just better. I prefer choice, variety, having multiple picks available to us, and then as well having, for instance, one being a little bit more damage, but then losing a little bit in like maybe handling or reload speeds or stuff like that. That is my preference. But the Lexington, to actually address that elephant in the room right away, let's go to the burst and sustain tables. I've actually made a burst and sustain table specifically for the PTS. We've altered the values to the PTS values. It's mostly reload speeds, and a few base damages. 4 weapons in total had their base damages altered. If we go into that and into the AR section here, on the burst, we see that the Lexington is where it used to be on top. It is no longer, but it is actually still. Because actually the top dog in this, if we disregard the Lexington, and let's zoom in as well a little bit as we can make that a little lot larger. The FAMAS is basically the top dog in here, as we saw when we actually calculated on build, because of course, the F2000 and the Honey Badger here, they're missing a mod. They basically have to either give up 5 crit chance or 10 crit damage for their extra damage that they have here, and that's basically their compensation. So the FAMAS was the top dog. It was below the Lexington. It is still below the Lexington. In this case, though, it is no longer basically the 4% or the 3.5% that it was. It is now basically a percent and a bit, a percent and a half. That is also the amount. If we kind of scroll to the right, we have here actually what the old number of the Lexington was. Together with that, how much is the new number of the old number? And yeah, it's this 98.86% basically. As well versus the M4, which is of course the base weapon for it, even though it doesn't take off over all of its traits, because yeah, it has different recoil pattern, but it has the same RPM. It had basically it has a 3.7% increase on the base damage versus the M4. It still puts it as the top of the table. We will eventually, of course, do the on-build comparisons again once the actually final numbers go into next season. We'll likely see the Lexington be on top again if this is its final form. I would have preferred it to be basically flat out the same as the FAMAS. It would still be the top weapon because it is much more better handling than the FAMAS, and it is better reloading than the FAMAS. That would be enough already. But it is still basically, still a little bit ahead, but not as much as it was. Is it balanced? I still wouldn't say so, but it's better than it was. Slight improvement there. And of course, yeah, actually all of the ARs are getting some reload speeds improved. Of note, actually, is that the fall wasn't in the list, but yeah, it does actually get a reduction. You can see that actually on this right side, we have the old numbers. That is you also go into the sheets. We have the old numbers on the right side here, and then basically a percentage difference. The new number, how much percent of it is it from the old number? And yeah, we can see that the reductions are actually pretty hefty, and some weapons are getting quite a bit, some even reaching into the 80% basically, so they've gained like more than 10%. And yeah, those are pretty hefty. The fall was not in the list. It did still get a bonus. Of note as well, the Carbine 7 actually had the same speed in there, which a lot of people were like, wait, they put the same number and they put it green. Now, actually, it turns out that was a mistake on that list. There is actually an improved number for it. We can see that, yeah, it used to be a 2.14, it's a 2.02. So yeah, it actually did get above. It's just unstated. Any numbers that are in blue, there is some oddity there that I want to kind of address. Of course, to the burst, that doesn't do anything. Reload speed does not get calculated into the burst. Burst is basically just base and RPM, although RPM as RPS because it is a burst DPS. So we're taking this, dividing by 60 times that's this number. Where, of course, reload does matter is in sustain. And what has happened actually on the sustain end is what they've done, because some of the buffs are very tiny. The FAMAS, for instance, got a 0.01 improvement, which is basically kind of comical. But they've actually given a lot of the weapons that were low on the burst table. So if we kind of go to the burst table, we can see kind of at the bottom here, as we're at the top, it is not those big increases, except for instance here with the Honey Badger is one of the standouts that is getting quite a bit of sustain basically to reload there. But yeah, as we kind of go down, this mid part as well is not getting that much, but then especially the lower parts, the weapons that are lower in burst are getting a lot more sustained by their reload, basically getting much improved reloads. Does that alter the landscape? Overall, I wouldn't say so. We generally still pick on burst, but it's definitely I think it is an interesting move, and we might, choose to grab some of the other ones. Of note as well, the Honey Badger actually moved up by quite a bit, and actually the Honey Badger is now a contender, especially as a combination burst sustain weapon. The FAMAS used to be that. The FAMAS is now very much a burst weapon. It is still the highest burst, but I feel this Honey Badger actually moved up quite a bit, especially on the sustain end. And it is actually high on the burst end, even though, of course, it's a -1 mod, so it ends up kind of behind the fall here, actually. But it's still a decent pick. Overall, of course, as well, it didn't really attach. Nothing on mag damage is getting altered. The fast hands numbers are, of course, getting altered as well. But yeah, I would say go look at them in depth. Of note as well, a little bit lower in that list, we have actually the breakout for where I did my calculations basically on seeing on how the multiplier is, or the modifier is multiplying. And yeah, this kind of is the reason we know it is weapon damage, because it aligns with having it be additive to weapon damage instead of a separate multiplier. We can see the in-game numbers, and we can kind of see that, yeah, the only way to get those numbers is there. Of note, as a side note here, is that actually the final, that 96 plus momentum that we get, that tells us is a 25%. It seems to be a 30%, because actually the RPM kind of with in the same way that Strikers does show in game when you have the RPM increase, seeing as it's not from just a talent that is just activated. While you go into your menu and you have the higher momentums, you actually get to see the numbers of your RPM, and that final step seems to be 30%. At least with the number that it shows us here. I'm not sure if it is actually, or maybe this is mistaken, but there's at least something weird there. Yeah, let's move on actually very briefly towards SMGs. In the SMG category, yeah, we have just a few. We have one oddity. The Vector 45 was missing, but also the Vector 45 actually did not get an alteration here. What I do want to talk about though is that and I'm gonna scroll to the right here. Now, of course, the last season, the Dark Winter, which is the subject of this, the Dark Winter, now same stats. The Dark Winter is now actually reduced to be the same stats as the Vector 45, which is definitely a reduction to it. It used to have the previous season stats, basically, but all the SMGs got moved down a tiny bit, basically. So this is technically actually also a nerf to the Dark Winter. The Dark Winter still as Perfect Killer is really a decent choice. Attack Vector will outdo it a tiny bit on burst, but actually will be a little bit lower on, or will be a tiny bit on the sustain as well. But the Vector 45 being, well, the Dark Winter version is of course much easier to get than Attack Vector with at least if you have the means to grind and such, and you just can get it from name caches and such. The gold numbers here are especially that where the way that I'm putting reload numbers into here is with the watch in there. And of course, all of these other ones have a magazine slot. We're using a +20, -10% reload speed. So we're actually getting the same numbers there. Here, these don't have a magazine, so we're actually getting the in-game numbers here for them. Without basically with the watch active, 10% reload speed basically to it. Overall, a bunch of weapons did get, again, we kind of see the same. The bunch of weapons, especially that were lower on burst, are getting pretty hefty reload speed increases. And yeah, that does help them quite a bit. Overall, yeah, the attack vector, for instance, didn't get basically nothing. It went from a 1.7 to a 1.69. Which, yeah, is not really an increase. But overall, especially on the SMGs, a lot of them are getting actually pretty hefty reload bonuses and making them very more, they feel a lot more aggressive, basically. You can be a lot more aggressive with them, because a lot of them are getting to the points where, yeah, we're reaching, old Ouroboros reload speeds on them. Of note as well, yeah, we've added in the Oxpecker here on its on here. Of course, we're not accounting for talent or mods. Mod-wise, of course, it has 15 crit chance, so actually it does keep up just on base, basically, or on just its base DPSs versus some of the other weapons. It isn't as bad as, yeah, weapons that don't have any crit chance. We also have some headshot, we have some optimal range for mods. But yeah, of course, it doesn't have any damage talent to it. It is basically a utility talent, a survival talent. Overall, though, it isn't the worst burster, but yeah, it's definitely middle of the pack, and especially better weapons than it with a better damage talent can really outdamage it quite well. But the trade-off there is, of course, that you do get a lot of utility out of it. Moving on to the LMGs, we have basically the same thing. Although, of course, with the LMGs, we see a lot more gold numbers here because a lot of them are pouches, and then the pouches don't take away 10% reload. So yeah, that's why these numbers will be lower than their numbers. But this is the effective numbers that we'll have in the game, because with an RPK, we're not going to use the 15 round mag without the reload. We're generally going to go with that 20 round mag with a -10 reload. But yeah, the nice thing with the pouches is, yeah, you don't get that punishment with the -10. Overall as well, we kind of see the same thing. Those that are higher on burst, although all LMGs actually got a hefty reduction, because we even see the MG5s kind of have a pretty hefty reduction. The only one that wasn't in the list and also didn't get a reduction is the L86. The RPK as well is staying that one's staying at 95%, even though basically all of the other LMGs are kind of going under or around 90, low 90s basically. And yeah, that will actually help LMGs quite a bit, especially, for instance, yeah, this the normal MG5 that is now actually that was already one of the better picks and now even has a faster reload. Now as well, the infantry MG5 and the normal MG5 no longer have the same reload. The MG5 actually is better than it, which it already was, which seems like a weird choice here. I would actually flip these numbers if it was up to me. But overall, yeah, a bunch of them are getting very hefty reductions, and especially as well, things like the GR9 and the Stoner are going actually to AR reloads almost. And same for actually, yeah, the MG5 and such, especially if this was to be on Striker, where you get another 15 weapon handling. These are actually well doable reloads. Especially the MG5, I feel this is a pretty big boon to it. Some of the exotics as well, in all of the categories, the exotics are kind of getting some of those buffs as well. I do have a note there, and oh yeah, actually there's one RPK, the military RPK, which has the wrong reload. Basically, it doesn't have matching reload with the rest. The rest is at 4 seconds. The military RPK is at 4.16 seconds, which is just a bug, and hopefully will not make it to the main game that way. In rifles, we have actually some burst changes, because alongside of the reload speeds, where we also again have this M1A CQB not being in the list, but yeah, it's not being altered. Same for the 1886, but it's also, which was not in the list, but it's also not being altered because it's the same 100%. Same for it as well, actually, the lightweight M4, which was unmarked in there, which also is not getting a buff there, but the lightweight M4 was already the fastest reloaded in this list. We're also getting 3 weapons which have base increases. So we have here the Resolute, the lightweight M4. Both of those are getting, as we if we scroll a little bit to the right, we can see they gained, because these are the old bases, and in the same way as we did with the Lexington. So new number versus old number. The new number is 103%, 103%. But then we have on here the UIC mod 2 going to this number, 164k-ish, versus its old number of 144. That's a 13% increase to its base, which is basically a 13% buff to it. The UIC is now actually sitting above the SIG. And of course, yeah, even the CQB, when it is actually on build, will drop to be just a little bit above the SIG here. It is head-to-head basically with the MDR and the Mark 17, and it eats them for breakfast because it is so much better handling than them. I feel this buff is the only buff in here that I'm kind of like, this shouldn't happen, per se. The UIC, even if it was just 7 or 8% and was kind of in a little bit lower than, for instance, the SIG, a much worse handling weapon with 10 rounds less, with faster RPM, that would be, to me, a little bit balanced. Because the UIC, yeah, is one of the best handling rifles. It is now also one of the better damage dealing rifles. Because on Mark 17 and the 6 CQB, and then yeah, again, the 6 CQB kind of drops to be just above the 6, 716 basically here. Once it's on build, because yeah, it's missing that mod. That was kind of the balance of now. We were picking between those two, especially, and now we will just pick UIC because there is no reason not to. It has 20 more rounds than the Mark 17. It has much better handling than any other rifle in this list almost. And I feel it's a little silly to put it this high. I feel the Resolute, give 5% of that one to the Resolute, moving the Resolute up to into the LVOC area as well. That's more like 2%. I feel these could be all ahead, and then the Resolutes especially as well is a little bit better handling, not as good as the UIC, and that would help it a little. The Lightweight Report likely getting this buff is just because it's not getting any reload speed increase, but yeah, it was already very fast reloading. Overall as well, all of these are getting a decent amount, not as much as the LMGs, but yeah, there's definitely an improvement here to our reload speeds. And some of them, of course, carrying over to the exotics as well. All of the exotics that have a base weapon that is getting altered are getting that alteration as well. And then yeah, the shotguns and MRs did not get touched. Pistols did, and pistols especially is that the Regulus especially kind of gaining a little bit of traction against what it was. We're getting a 9% buff here to it on the reload. The Regulus, of course, the reload kind of got destroyed last season, but especially as well, some of the other weapons here on the exotics as well. Of note is, and yeah, this has caused a lot of hijinks and stuff. The Harvest is actually not the numbers that they put up on their under graphic. A lot of people were concerned that the base of it was getting nerfed and such. Turns out to be not the case, at least not for in the PTS, and I'm more inclined to believe the numbers in the PTS than those numbers on those sheets, because quite often there's mistakes in there. Mistakes happen. That way, the game at least gets checked a little bit more than that. And yeah, the Harvest has not received any nerfs or anything. It is actually, of course, the reload speed is getting buffed a little bit, just due to it being a 686 that it's carrying over. But yeah, that base number that was in there, that was just incorrect, and doesn't seem to be the case. They might be intending it, but they haven't implemented it, and I would likely believe the PTS here. Because also just the number that was giving there did not make much sense, honestly, if we were looking at it. And yeah, overall, all of the pistols as well getting a decent increase, except actually the recommended one from the pistol video as we had it, which was the M45 or the TAC 1911, and then also the card. The card did actually get a decent reduction to it. The TAC 1911 and the M45 did not actually. I feel this will push us a lot more towards the card 45 because it wasn't that far behind it, and now it has actually much better sustain, because yeah, it's going from a 1.74 to a 1.55 here, which is hefty. And yeah, actually having again that Regulus reload so much faster is kind of nice. But yeah, let's take it into some miscellaneous and then head out of here. And to kind of round it out here with some random stuff, one of the big ones as well is that they are actually improving the way we can get Season XP. Season XP this season was basically completely tied to just the scouts, the journey, and doing priority objectives. And also, yeah, actually weekly projects as well. It was actually a pretty slow grind. A lot of us had it kind of basically bug on us on the first week and basically give us season level 100 very easily. It turned out that if you didn't get that, it was actually a pretty big grind, and I did actually do that grind on my second account, where I went, I on purpose left them until that was fixed, and then tried to grind it out myself. It did take quite a bit. Overall, I did actually, I didn't do all of the scouts too early and such, and not noticing how much XP they gave. But yeah, once kind of figuring that out, that helped quite a bit. Doing a bunch of the weeklies, even for instance, especially getting multiple SHG requisitions from watch alts and such, and hardcore characters on that account as well, into there as well, helped quite a bit. But actually, when grinding it, it was pretty slow. One thing they're doing is basically putting season XP on a lot of the activities and missions and such alongside of everything else. That will help grind out the season XP quite a bit more, and that is pretty helpful. That was a very annoying thing. Also as well, actually, speaking of priority objectives, they're removing several things from them, which is, in this case, the Warhound Convoy, the Elite Resource Convoy, and Elite Territory Control. It's missing Elite Patrol as well in there as one of the harder things to get, because those Elite Patrols also don't spawn often, but Yeah, so they're making it a little bit easier. The season XP isn't as tied to that system as well, because that was really the only way that you could grind it. You could get the scouts, and then you could do your weeklies and your dailies and such every day. But if you just wanted to grind it, it was only really priority objectives. And this is, I feel, a much better system. Having kind of also looked at the numbers, yeah, that seems very much doable. And honestly, for those of us that at times grind, just open world stuff and such, well, we'll get through it pretty quickly, which will be somewhat nice, somewhat not nice. I did enjoy actually grinding out through that, through it, and actually, definitely, I believe now this middle ground that they're going to will be a much better system than we used to have, where we just grinded levels and just got the 100 levels done as quickly as possible, usually on the very first day of a new release. And yeah, with that as well, of note is that the several things have also been fixed, which you would hope, which are mostly as well unlisted. Of note is, for instance, that the Centurion holster no longer seems to be. You can't put both buffs on one weapon, which is a nice thing, but you can still get the reload out of it. So it's we're kind of have to see how that works out. Several minor improvements here and there as well. Just the game does feel pretty. I was having some frame dips here and there, which I haven't noticed at all on the PTS server. So hopefully those kind of things carry over as well. But yeah, we've come basically to the end of this video. A very long one, but yeah, hopefully well worth it. We're heading into a new season with some new toys, and I'm looking forward to using those, of course. Overall, I think what we've seen so far in this PTS, it has been very, very, very promising, actually. This seems like one of the better seasons gear-wise as well. That gear set, I'm curious to see if it'll go in the game with its final stats, or with those stats as its final, as we have it here, but I wouldn't per se even be against it. It is definitely a little OP, but so is a lot of competitors to it. For instance, FI. I will find myself using these gloves at times, I feel, as well. Same for instance as well, trying to just run the Oxpecker and pecker some oxes. Even though I don't think it is a very meta choice, I feel it is definitely a very enjoyable choice, and trying to just min-max towards it. Especially the gear set stands out as very useful to me, I think, and will likely actually displace a few combat medics, which I'm kind of sad about, but I'm also looking forward to having a different playstyle to heal my allies while doing some damage myself. So yeah, let's round it out here and just say that thank you all for joining me. If you did enjoy this video, please do any and all of the algorithm things below, so it does help out. So do that little bit of shilling. For future videos, we're going to actually go into a special one pretty soon. And for those interested in maybe asking me some questions, I'll be putting up a community note when this video is up already. And I'm looking for some questions as well, going into a Q&A as we'll reach the anniversary of the channel once again, as in the same way we did last year. We'll do a Q&A basically on that. And yeah, that'll likely be recorded on the 10th of February, which is a day before the full anniversary of the channel. So yeah, if you are interested in asking me anything, please do go and add your question to that to those community notes. And yeah, it can be about me, it can be about the game, about anything you want to ask about. And yeah, I hope you join me for those future videos while we turn those into those questions into me answering them. And yeah, we'll just end it here by saying, as always, have a good night.